Hi everyone. This is both a live event here in the Live It Hub Bali and also online. So it's actually my first time doing this. So technically speaking, I'm not sure if it's working. It says I'm live for 26, 30, 30. It's okay. No one is live, it seems. So yeah, let's try to focus on you guys present here and those who join us live. Maybe Raymond, if you can join here and see if someone is. Hey, welcome to this live stream. We are just starting out. Hopefully, you can hear me well. All right. So, bear with me for a second. And let's go. Right. Thanks for coming, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Gay Marushka. And I want to give you a bit of background story to understand from where I come from and why I start this podcast. I'm originally from Romania, and I was born and raised in a small city in the heart of Transylvania. And yes, Transylvania exists. I'm not a vampire, and it's actually located in the beautiful Carpathian Garden of Romania. And after years of freelancing and basically trading time for money on freelancing platform and so on, I decided to start a one-person business, web design business, around 7 years ago in 2016. And welcome, Kent.
Hi. Sorry.
No worries. And since then, things changed for me because I moved away from the freelancing part and start the business side of things and start focusing more on business. And somewhere around last year, I didn't feel fulfilled. So I wanted to start something new. I had no idea what. And around the middle of December, I'm still learning how to use this remote control. In middle of December, I met Ondra, which is sitting left side of me in this picture, on a hike in the middle of the jungle in Thailand. And he invited me to Instagram Live. And I say straight away no to him because I'm an introvert and I'm camera shy. I'm afraid of public speaking, so I'm here to face my fear. And eventually, after a bit of convincing, I say yes to him. And saying yes opened myself to an opportunity to basically sit with him for 1 hour and literally having a conversation. And I enjoy so much. And after 1 hour of talking, I feel energized, with the exception of sitting in calls with clients and feeling drained after just 15 minutes of Zoom calls and so on. And I started visioning myself like doing this every single time. But this was just one of the reasons why I decided to start a podcast. The other one is my mission. I wanted to build something much more fulfilling than what I'm currently doing with the web design business. And the other part is to actually impact as many lives as possible. And my mission is to help over 10,000 freelancers to escape the trap of trading time for money on freelancing platforms. And doing so, I realized that I can share my knowledge on various platforms and so on. And I was in the middle of a video coaching program to allow me to start public speaking and to create video content and so on. And in that process, I jumped with Ondra in that Instagram Live. And I envisioned myself doing this every single day. So after that moment, I just told myself, like, how, apart from sharing my knowledge, I can impact others, because it's just my experience, it's just my 2 cents, just my opinion. So the idea of podcasting come to life, and realizing that I can share the knowledge of a lot of other experts, a lot of other, I don't know, visionaries, people that are way ahead of me in time and space. And that way, I was like, let's learn everything I can about podcasting. That was middle of December. And I planned to launch in 2 weeks, basically in January. So I started literally learning everything I could in that period of time and start to invite guests to the podcast without the podcast being launched yet, without having any idea how I record, what I will do this thing, how a podcast is all about. I had no idea that, for example, that I need a hosting for my podcast. I cannot just push, I don't know, an audio to Spotify or Apple Podcast and so on. But more of that in a second. And since then, I'm about to launch today the 17th episode with that guy in green sitting there hiding, which was my guest in the show. And I managed to land one of my heroes in the podcast, which is that there are two bald guys there, but one has a hat. And that, if you don't recognize him, it's Chris Do, which is a huge figure in the creative world, has The Future, which is an education platform with over 2 million subscribers. And he accepted to be in my show without knowing me priorly, without me starting the podcast, and so on. He's an amazing person. So I own a lot of him. And let's jump into the cool things. What we'll cover today. First, of course, what and the benefits of starting a podcast. Then we go to the inevitable challenges, solutions to them, and so on. We'll go through the essential skills, tools, and practical tips that you can use in order to launch a podcast, how to create an interview-style podcast, finding and inviting guests, how to promote your podcast, monetizing your podcast, conclusion and key takeaways, and between all these big topics, we'll have Q&A sessions. So write down your questions because we'll answer them here. All right, so what are the benefits of podcasts? First is building authority and increase visibility. In this graph there, you can see that I try to post, this is from LinkedIn, by the way, and I tried to post starting last year around August. As you can see, I didn't get much traction, but coincidentally or not, when I start to tell the world about the fact that I'm going to launch a podcast, my content impression increased. And after launching the podcast in January, where you can see that spike of traffic, that's thanks to actually the episode with Chris Do, because that episode was shared by him and so on and got a lot of traction. And this is just one of the benefits of it, like basically being able to expose your content to the world. The other one is connected with this type of thought leaders and influencers, and one of them is Chris. Another one is Jonas there, but of course Jonas is already my friend before we started the podcast. And I have another guest here in the public. And this is a big one because it's probably so far the biggest benefit of me hosting this podcast. Because I was able to connect with people that before that, with the exception of Chris Do, weren't even looking at me. But since I started the podcast, they approached me to be in the show. They approached me to have collaboration and partnerships. And it's a huge, huge asset that you can have. The other one is reaching and connecting with new audiences that are not only consuming, for example, written content or video content and so on. And a lot of people are listening to podcasts, and podcasting is a huge increasing market. And another option is to repurpose opportunities to repurpose this type of content. For example, even that the podcast can be recorded normally just audio, you can record video as well. You can repurpose that audio and video into written format like blog posts and so on, for Reels on Instagram and TikTok, and of course newsletter. And the other one, it's of the benefits is having a relatively low cost entry point into the content creation world, which compared with other options, it's much more cheaper to start. And probably the biggest one, but we'll get to this in a second, is the fact that it's a growing multi-billion-dollar industry. And this are the prediction. It's not really visible on that graph, but here we are in 2023, and it's expected to, as you can see, to grow exponentially moving forward. And that's because we love to consume fast content on the move, driving a car, going to the gym, and so on. And that's just one of them. I went to them very fast because I want to have an interactive connection with you guys, and I wanted to ask questions. And if so far you have any questions regarding the benefits of having a podcast. Stuart, I saw you raise your hand.
Did you? I've got questions for some of your other slides. Not quite yet.
Sounds good. Anyone having a question about the benefits of holding a podcast?
You said a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
How you are actually going to monetize your podcast?
Oh my God, I have 10 ways to monetize the podcast, and I'll go through each and see every single one of them in about half an hour.
There's one question later on.
So I know that's a burning question indeed. So
Yeah, I
let's,
have one.
yeah,
How
please.
did you, so the very first person who was speaker on your podcast, like, who was that?
Jessica is her name, and
Right.
she was the girl next to Raluca and next to Ondra in that tuk-tuk in Thailand.
Here you go.
Yeah,
Because my question is, I guess a lot of people that are looking into to start something like that, they have this decision paralysis because they have this thing like, oh, I have to start super big and like the first speaker has to be, I don't know, an influencer to start. But from what you're saying, you can start very small with, and it's not small, but start with your immediate circle. Like you can invite a friend, a coworker, a ex-colleague from another company and stuff like that. Just do it. Like just start
Exactly.
somewhere.
That's a really good one.
That's what you're saying, or was this your journey in a way?
Yes, and even that was a small mistake, let's say, because I could, for example, make the first episode with Chris Do, because so far the first episode is the episode everyone is checking out.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, that episode, since I was at the beginning, it's quite crap in terms of quality and editing, even that the story is amazing, because she basically escaped like a slave life in an agency to become a freelancer and later a solopreneur. So yeah, and we share some exciting story about walking and not walking, how you call it, hiking barefoot in the middle of the jungle. That's how we met, because we had to hike through a waterfall, and that's how I met Jessica and Ondra, which both were in the show. And yeah, that's the easiest way to actually start getting guests in your podcast. And of course, there are a lot of challenges starting a podcast, and one of them, in my situation, like recording on the road. Basically, finding a solution for weird scenarios. Like, seeing that picture, I have literally a yoga mat on the wall, blankets to block that side of the wall, simply to absorb the echo. Because, as you know, in podcasts, sound is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I recorded without those on the wall. And this is actually me prepared to record with Chris Do. So he had like an amazing, probably multi-million studio from which he recorded. And I was like in the kitchen in Vietnam, trying to make it work. And outside was like people doing construction work and so on. So recording on the road, if you record this on the road, you need to be flexible to find solutions that you cannot foresee. For example, I don't know, planning in advance, trying to find a quiet location, ideally, like we have here at Live.it, like a phone booth in which is like soundproof and so on, without echo and such. So that really helps. Another one is to getting your first guest, like you really well brought in. And one option is the best, to get people you're already familiar with, that you already talk with, because that way you are able to literally have a casual conversation like we have here. Not to be stressed out that, oh my God, I need to talk with this person. For example, before jumping in a call with Chris Do, I was like so freaking nervous because I was like talking with my hero, with a person that has huge experience to podcasting, and I had no idea how that episode would turn out. And so far it's the best episode I had. I'm not sure, lucky or whatever. But getting your first guest, we'll go more into this a bit later to show you many ways you can do that. Another one is balancing time and resources. When someone wants to start a podcast, usually do something else, and this is just another way to market their services or their personal brand and so on. And balancing time and resources for me was probably the biggest challenge. I still didn't overcome it entirely, but I find some ways to balance it. For example, trying to batch record in advance episodes. So that allow me like a time span to be able to actually be able to focus on my business and other endeavors that I had. And money was the other one because monetizing podcast is like a long-term game. So yeah, there is some investment that you have to make, and we'll go through that in a second. But yeah, this is probably the biggest challenge and yet to have like a perfect solution. But if you're thinking about starting one, consider your at least 1 day a week to put aside for just for that, like podcast related things, because it can take that amount of time from your plate. So consistency in content and production. Yeah, again, this is as I showed you earlier that you have the opportunity to repurpose content. It's huge when it comes to the time needed to do that. For example, I both record video and audio, and I'm still yet to launch my video version of the podcast on YouTube. And of course, that's a pity because the majority of traffic should come from there. And any other like repurposing the content for the website that I still didn't launch, and so on. And so are a lot of things involved. I don't want to scare you, but you can literally see it as Kent had a conversation with him last night, like a mountain that you are facing. But the good news is that with that mountain in face, I still was able to launch it in just 2 weeks of learning all these things that I'll share with you today. And of course, getting traction without an existing audience. Because when I started, with the exception of Raluca behind, that I was sure that she will listen to my podcast, my family and friends, probably no one else will have listen. And I was like, how I'm going to, get listener into the podcast? And we'll show you that as well. Now, I know probably the Q&A is too often, but I think after this slide, you might have some questions.
Yeah, I have a question. About your time commitment at the moment, how much time do you kind of put into, I guess, the whole macro? So creating the content, planning, cutting it all up, turning it into micro bits of content. What's that kind of look like at the moment for you? Versus, I guess, when you started.
Now I'm not spending as much time as when I started, to be honest. Because, for example, now I have help with editing, and that's the most consuming part. So at the beginning, I was spending in average like 1 day per episode. And the most consuming part is editing, which takes me back then around 4 hours in total, just editing 1 hour of podcast episode.
So 1 day per
episode. So I launch weekly episodes, so that's basically 4 days per month I was spending on podcast. But since I batch record them, I was spending a lot of time.
Okay.
How long per episode?
Sorry?
How long per episode? How long is the duration of your one episode?
I try to keep it between 45 and 1 hour. I record usually around 1 hour and a few minutes to have be able to edit parts out.
Did you do every time you do podcasts, for example, you take 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or just 1 hour only? Did you put all of that into the podcast, or did you cut out some parts?
I cut a lot of parts because usually both me or my guests do mistakes, like in speaking, or I think 90% of my guests are using English as a second language. So we do mistakes, me including, especially me. And repeating words or long pauses or or filling words and stuff like that. So imagine that let's say in average is 1 hour, I end up between 45 minutes and 50 or something, depending on how good the episode is.
What is your tips to keep consistent in creating your content? Because in Lapsa, the company that I work with, they did podcasting, and that becomes the first and also the last podcast that they share. So there's always tips to keep consistent.
It all depends. Actually, this is a mental thing. So it all depends on you. Because if you're searching for results from the beginning to try to find results out of the gate, it's almost impossible to stay consistent. So you need to look at the future. why you're doing this, or what's your meaning behind this. And of course, you can have small wins. For example, I don't know, you land an important guest in your podcast, or you're able to, I don't know, find an amazing story. In this case, being an interview type of podcast. But of course, there are many other formats of podcasting. And you just ask yourself, why I'm doing this? And for me, is to share as much value as possible. And we'll go to the format of the podcast in a second, with my audience, which are freelancers, aspiring solopreneurs, 9-to-5ers that want to jump out of the full-time job, and so on. And to try to inspire all of these people, that's my goal, like that's my mission. And I know that is the easiest and faster way to to share the message to a lot of others. So yeah, you need to have this in mind. It is not easy because of course you'll have a lot of challenges coming your way. For example, like me, I have to launch a podcast, the podcast with Ionuț today, and I didn't manage to edit the podcast entirely yet. So
6 p.m.
exactly, and I had to do it for 6 p.m. in just a bit. So yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but you need to envision why I'm doing this and for how long do you want to plan to do it. And there is not the perfect solution. Don't have to be like weekly releases. You can do like monthly releases. You can do per season. For example, Kent is having a podcast and he has 10 episodes per season. So you need to find how you call it? Pace that, thank you. You have to find a pace that it's working for you, to not get overwhelmed depending on your work and so on. Please.
Regarding about consistency, that you mentioned, I was wondering how did you come up with the topic? Because I see on the list of your podcast, it's related to solopreneur and digital nomad and career.
Yeah.
So, how do you know that, okay, I'm going to have this as a topic and these guys will be my audience, let's say. Did you come up with it like at the beginning when you started a podcast, or it's goes along the way? Okay, I finally found my audience here, their audience, so I will stick with these topics.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, I kind of know from the beginning. So that's why I say that this is part of my mission of helping freelancers. And usually this is a business podcast, but I put the spin of the nomad life and invite basically from 4 guests a month. I have 3 that are either nomads or solopreneurs, and 1 that's a special guest that is an industry leader like Ionuț, for example, or will be Stuart tomorrow. And this type of people, or like Chris Do, that are basically bringing the expertise outside of being a solopreneur. They actually either run businesses or they are like in the executive role in their business that they're working for. So the main topic is business and how to grow a business as a solopreneur, because that's why I want freelancers to escape the time for money trap. Because if you are just trading time for money, you have a limited amount of time in a day and so on. And sharing all this expertise of others, and with this spin of nomading, because you have to have a bit of entertaining inside the podcast and trying to make people listen, not just actionable tips, resources, and so on, which is the bigger topic. But yeah, you have to be a bit entertaining. And yeah, I knew this from the beginning, and you have to, because otherwise you won't know who will be your guest, what type of discussion we have with them, and so on. Please.
I'm Indonesian, so in Indonesia, when we say podcast, means video. I don't think many people listen to the audio version of podcast. I don't know why, but not really. So, do you think like the audio version of podcast is downtrending now, or?
I don't think we'll die, but indeed the video is getting traction a lot, and a lot of the biggest platform in the world, YouTube, just launched, I think 1 month ago, the podcast functionality.
Okay.
and it will be also host of podcasting. And Spotify as well launched the video version too. So yeah, the trend is going towards the video side of things, and especially thanks to big podcasts like Joe Rogan Show or The Diary of a CEO, which all these guys have like huge audiences and people actually watch that show thanks to their like, I don't know, guests, which are like celebrities and so on. So, and it's one of the reasons why I start as well to record both video and audio, even that my video is not yet launched, but I have them all and I'll plan to put them on YouTube too.
So you haven't compared between the audio version and video version, which one get more traction?
No, not yet, because I didn't launch yet the video version. But yeah, I'll let you know soon after I launch. Oops, we went ahead. So thanks so much for the question. We go ahead because we have quite a bit to cover and we'll have space for Q&A as well. So let's go through the essential skills and tools and software that you need in order to run a podcast. And there are 5 must-have skills. Especially if you want to have an interview-style podcast, you need to be able to active listening, because otherwise you won't be able to follow the conversation and ask the right questions. And of course, good interviewing skills, which is asking the right questions, guiding the conversation, and so on. And of course, communication skills, time management, and adaptability. Adaptability is one of the biggest one because something had happened out of the blue. For example, before jumping into this live, my camera stopped working. Happened when I recorded video notes. Before jumping in with him, my camera stopped working. So you need to find the solution fast. And since it's also video recording, I just switched to the front-facing camera of the laptop, which is a good way to find that or to do that. And yeah, as you can see, there is no editing there. Why didn't put it? Because that's, again, the most time-consuming thing, and it's not the must-have skill. You can literally outsource that to others, and it's something that I recommend to do as fast as possible to save your time. But this one, especially if you want to launch a interview-style podcast, are a must. Now, there are 3 recommended tools: a mic, a laptop, and headphones. No fancy equipment, just 3 simple things. And the reason behind it is that even if I have an interesting conversation last night with Kent, even if, I don't know, the audio is not crystal clear, studio, level, and so on, people will still listen if it's like on the background or any other annoying noises and so on. And headsets to stop the echo. Even that software nowadays, the recording software, is so good that you don't really need headphones, but they are good to start to stop the echo. And of course, a laptop to record from, but some software providers allows you to even record on a phone. But of course, it depends on what type of podcast you record. But this is just enough, and most of us have a laptop, most of us have a headset. Doesn't have to be like that. You can have literally normal, like old school headphones. And a mic, I literally record with that one that you can see on the table. And hopefully those joining us online can hear me well. And that one is like $50. And for $50, you can actually buy a podcast-grade mic. This is not for podcasting, but I'm still doing with it because it's very low in weight, so I can travel with it everywhere. And the holding is just the GoPro handle. And you don't need basically anything else, special lighting and so on. Of course, if you have the budget, it's nice to have your own studio, it's nice to have your own things, but if you're recording on the road and you have to be as low budget as possible, this is basically enough. Now, another important aspect is the recording software. Because if you do like me, recording outside of the studio, which is usually to rent very expensive, you have to recording on the fly. And there are a lot of free options, from Spotify to Zoom to Audacity, I hope I pronounced correctly, to more expensive pay options like Squadcast that I personally use and Riverside. Because when I choose Squadcast, Riverside wasn't available at that price point, and didn't have the features that it has now, which my number one recommendation now is Riverside, not Squadcast that I use. But why is software important? Because you are able to simply send a link, like you do like with the Zoom link, to your other interview to your guest, sorry, and you're able to record remotely. So they'll record separately an audio file and a video file, so you have the flexibility to edit as you please. Another important factor to take into consideration when you choose a software, because for example, you can simply use Zoom, but the free version has time limit to 45 minutes, if not less. I didn't use it in a while. And for example, Spotify allows you to record only audio, doesn't allow you to record video as well, like Riverside, Podcast, or Zoom. Audacity, whatever. I'm not sure it allows to record more than audio. So you need to factor all this thing into consideration when you choose a software to record your podcast. And of course, what features they have, the price point, and what backup system they have in place in order to, if case internet goes off or something, to be able to actually have a backup in place to not re-record that episode. Apart from software, you need recording software, you need editing software for audio and video. And both Audacity and Spotify has that option to record straight into their tools in which you also record with. And Spotify is investing lots of money into podcasting, so I think it will be the number one tool moving forward to both host, edit, and record your podcast. But so far, they're not using video recording, and they're partnered with Riverside. Descript is a bit more advanced way to editing, and especially for video. They automatically use AI to transcribe the video, and you can edit simply text, like you're editing a Google Doc. And if you remove a word, it will remove as well the audio and video, and it's a non-destructive way of editing, in which if you made a mistake, you can always hit undo and go back in time and simply do the edit. And has a bunch of features like removing automatically filler words, long pauses, which saves you, I use it personally, Descript, and saves you basically, instead of using, I don't know, spending days for an episode, I can record edit in a few hours. And of course, it can be even faster than that if I won't listen to every single part of the episode, but that's another story. Auphonic, it's a really cool and powerful automatic way to remove noise. Are you cold? You can get something.
A blanket?
Yeah, blanket. And for those watching online, we are in Bali, but it's a bit chilly because of the air conditioning. And Auphonic is a cool tool because it allows you to insert the audio that you already edit into Descript on any other tools. You upload it, and it's automatically removing noise, hums, de-essence. Sorry.
For example, like,
Yeah, exactly. And so all this like annoying noise, it's automatically being removed, and you're able to add meta tags and so on to make the export in MP3 at the exact settings that you need to upload to your podcast hosting. So it's for 5 hours, just $12, and basically you can have like 4 or 5 episodes for that amount, and it's not. Sorry, audio engineers, but you're not needed anymore with this kind of tools, with AI tools that are literally doing on the fly. Of course, for more advanced noise, like, I don't know, powerful noise that they are not removed entirely. And another powerful thing with it is not altering the voice. So basically, it's just maintaining the voice, the background music if you have, and so on. And of course, if you want to use more advanced tools, for those that like tech approach, DaVinci Resolve, it's a free one, and Premiere Pro, it's a paid one from Adobe. And you will need hosting, because in order to distribute to all the major podcast stations, you'll need somewhere to host your audio, the same way like you host a website. And personally, I use Red Circle because for the audio only, it's free. And since I still didn't launch the video version of the podcast, I don't need the paid plan. And I'll personally move to YouTube or Spotify. I'm not sure to which platform yet. because I'm not sure if Spotify allows yet to push your video to YouTube because it's their competitors. And yeah, that might be a limitation. And of course, you can use as well Podbean and Buzzsprout, which are also paid version. But for most people, YouTube podcast and Spotify for podcasters will be more than enough. And I personally will choose one of those two. And this will allow you automatically to push your episode once you upload it directly to Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, and whatever. So that's the job for you. You just need to sync those tools with your hosting, because you'll get a link that you need to sign up for all these podcast stations and push it towards those. And go fast through some practical tips to launch a podcast. As you already discussed, that you need a niche and a target audience in order to be able to launch. And that is basically part of your goal. What's your goal with launching a podcast? You know, like if you plan to grow your business, if you plan to have, I don't know, multiple services or monetize it and so on, depending on that, you choose a niche and a target audience. And you need to plan the content and the format of a podcast, because there is no just interview style podcast. You have podcasts that are literally narrative podcasts like Ken has, or there are solo podcasts in which you literally share your knowledge with the world, in which you're sitting in front of the mic and recording yourself. And a lot of podcasts are like that. The interview style is probably the most competitive niche to enter to, and it's very hard to break through. And of course, you'll need to create a compelling artwork and branding. On the first slide, you notice that I have that artwork. That is basically what is shown in various podcasting platforms in order to stand out, because people will discover you like that. They are like just browsing like you do, for example, YouTube or whatever, and you see that small thumbnail, and that's the artwork. And of course, to have consistent branding like I do with this purple. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So people will recognize you by your logo or by your artwork and so on. Something that I didn't have at the beginning, and I still don't, is to have a podcast trailer, because some podcast providers allows you to upload a trailer, so people will listen to that before deciding if they listen to a full episode. I have a teaser for every episode, like a 30-second teaser to like a movie trailer to make people listen to the full episode, but I don't have like a show teaser or trailer that I still need to do. And you'll need, in theory, at least it's not mandatory, to have a unique soundtrack or music theme. And this is a way to, make especially the beginning of the podcast more engaging, have a background noise, have like a theme song that is starting. And this you can get, personally I get it on Fiverr for about like $70 or $80, and it's basically one-time payment with license and everything. And you'll need to edit your episodes for clarity and quality. And the editing part, when it comes to clarity, the voice is the most important thing. All the other things are redundant if the voice is not okay. So focus on that, and same when it comes to the quality. Another tip to launch your podcast is to launch at the beginning multiple episodes at the same time, like 2 or 3. It's a mistake that I did, and why is this important is because people will get a sense. Maybe they don't connect with the first episode, but you'll have another one, they can check it out. Same apply with the third and so on. Like in the third, these 3 are the most used ways. Batch record and schedule as much as possible. Why is this important? Even that it's a bit annoying for those that are your guests, because they might wait a month or 2 until the episode is going live. But for you, it can be a time saver. For example, I did a mistake to not edit in time the episode that I have to launch today, and now I won't be able to launch it on time. But this is an exception in my case. In the rest, I have batch record. For example, recorded episode, I have, I think, until July or August already. And I still plan next week to record, I think, 5 or 6 episodes. So that way I get covered for like half a year and not needing to, think, oh, next destination in my nomad journey, where will be? I will have options to record from there. For example, this type of batch recording saved me in Vietnam. We moved in an apartment that it was impossible to record. There was no studio in town or co-working space that had a sound booth phone booth to be able to record in a quiet environment. And Vietnamese love karaoke, so they sing everywhere. Imagine that you have noise from all directions. That's one thing. The other thing was like construction going on. So I had to reschedule 1 month of recordings. But I was covered because I already recorded before that my episodes. So it was not a big problem, with the only discomfort of my telling the guest that I have to reschedule. And as I mentioned already, outsource editing as soon as possible. It's the most time-consuming part. You can find cheap editing online. You can do a lot of editing automatically, as I mentioned, with Audacity and Auphonic, sorry. And all these time-consuming things, if you have the budget, try to outsource, because otherwise it'll be very, very hard to keep track. As you know, I didn't outsource the episode with Jonas because I wanted to edit personally, since he's a friend, and I end up in the situation that I'm now. Jonas will be the second, how you call it, celebrity in this live. And another one is to leverage AI tools to make your life easier. Because in order to launch a podcast, you have to do a lot of things, like having show notes, having summaries, having timestamps, and so on. And all of those things can get done very fast using ChatGPT and other AI tools, like, for example, Castmagic. Castmagic is a tool, and you simply upload MP3 of the episode, and it's generated for you like 10 options of titles, show notes, description, timestamps, codes, and so on. Of course, are not perfect like any other AI tool output, but you can use those and be able to edit them and make them work for you. I cover a lot of things in this past minute, so now let's have another set of questions, please.
You mentioned about having to outsource the editing part. What if the edited episode is not as expected as you want it to be?
Oh, I was in that situation for like 6 or 7 times. Yeah, that's the challenging part, and I'll grab some water. The challenging part is to actually find someone that is basically being able to edit properly. And personally, I didn't have the budget to invest like hundreds of dollars in one episode, so I used as cheap as possible options. And for me, didn't work yet. Now I have help internally, like my girlfriend is helping me editing, but yeah, without that help, I was like, yeah, it's very hard, to be honest, to find out a lower price. There are some agencies that are doing like for $1,000 for 4 episodes, which is expensive. The price points that I tried from like $20 per episode until $100 per episode, and neither the 100 didn't work. I was basically having bad luck. I wasn't maybe clear enough with what I want. I'm also a perfectionist. So I was like, if I was able to edit in a certain way as a newbie, a person that has no experience in editing or audio engineering, or using automatic tools like the one that I mentioned, a person that is doing this for a living is not able to at least arrive at that level. I won't be able to pay that person. So at least was my way of thinking. But if you're not a perfectionist, and I don't recommend to be one, then you're safer with some options between below $50 per episode.
Have you ever done a podcast with your guest, but your guest is remotely somewhere far away from you?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Like, you've done a podcast, but then your guest is in a different location.
Every single episode was like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that's why I use those recording tools, the recording software. I never record a live podcast, and I want to try tomorrow with Stuart to do one live to see how it works. Because if you do face-to-face, in theory at least, you need a mixer. You need to insert 2 microphones and capture both, like 2 cameras to capture from both angles for both you and the guest, the video and so on. Not sure how we'll try it. Probably sitting here at the table and with the camera in front of us, speaking on the same mic. I don't know, we'll try. But yeah, it's much more easier also to edit if you record remotely because you have 4 files. You have 2 audios and 2 videos, and you basically can mix them much more easier. And Descript, for example, allows you to do that very easily because you can also detach the audio from the video and so on. Any other questions?
I do.
Please.
What are some effective storytelling techniques or formats to make your podcast, more engaging?
You read my mind? So Raymond asked basically this, how to create an interview style podcast, more or less. And first you need to determine the episode structure. And this is important because you don't want to be boring. And I'm still struggling to find a perfect balance because people, for example, when I started, I was introducing the guest myself. And I would say that I'm not the most entertaining person when I speak. So the beginning of the episode were quite boring. And that's one thing. The other thing, people want to arrive straight at the meat. They don't want to boring intros, commercials, and so on. So the way I structure my episode now, it's simple. I have a very, very short teaser of 30 seconds to make them have the best idea about the episode. Then I have a 7-second theme music. And after that, I go straight into basically talking with my guest. And I allow them to introduce themselves because usually they know best who they are. Of course, I do the research beforehand and so on, but I allow them to introduce themselves. And that way, they are, in a theory, especially if they have experience with podcasting, much more entertaining. And I usually start with allowing them to talk about the transformation that they have in their life, because people are curious about other stories, and these transformational stories are grabbing listeners' attention. And that way, you're able to basically go through the conversation, guide the conversation towards other points. Another important aspect in my episodes are the fact that I have 2 challenges. So around the middle of the episode, I challenge them to build an actionable framework based on their expertise. And that actionable framework is a step-by-step process to either build something or, I don't know, comment something that is really helpful for those listening. And after, we continue with the conversation based on that framework. And at the end, allow them to promote themselves because they are taking the time to spend time with you, to join the conversation, to share the knowledge. And imagine that in one episode, you can, sometimes I feel like I'm picking the brain of these experts because they share so much value, so much knowledge. For example, the person that I had an interview 2 days ago was able to share basically a masterclass in 1 hour. And of course, it depends how you put the questions, but they are sharing so much value that they charge probably thousands of dollars for that. And after that, after they promote themselves, I have a 24-hour challenge. They have to make this time for the listeners. So the listeners will have to go to this 24-hour challenge to do something that is helping them in their journey. And this is quite powerful because once you put your listeners to do something, they will think about you because you give them that challenge. And of course, it will be helpful for them because they'll have a transformation based on that challenge. Of course, probably not everyone is doing it, but is the way I structure my episodes. Others are doing other ways, like they have 15 minutes or 30 minutes episodes and having straight to the actionable tips. They are going into it and they don't share transformative stories, and others are just about that. About, for example, if you listen to Joe Rogan or if you listen to The Diary of a CEO, those podcasts are 2 hours long or even more, and they share a lot of personal stories of people are crying in their studios and so on, the guests. So it's depending. The interview style podcast can be in different formats. So using storytelling, like Raymond said, it's very powerful because that way you can put your guest as the hero and you guide the conversation with questions to go through the hero journey and so on, because they usually have a transformation. They went from A to B. For example, one of my guests was literally living isolated in the jungle in Costa Rica to stop being bored. He's came from Netherlands and he moved there, enter monk mode, focus on work, gym, eat, sleep. That was it, nothing else for 6 months. And that guy was able to transform his life because of that, thanks to that. But that's the thing, like, this is just an example of transformative stories, but there are many others that unfortunately I don't have the time to share, but you can listen to the show. And it's important to have a list of topics you want to cover when you start the interview style podcast. And especially, even that, as I mentioned, it's a business podcast, this one that I host, but every single guest has different expertise and they can cover different topics. So before jumping, for example, I have a form that I send to them and I allow them to choose up to 2-3 topics they can cover. So that way they're able to prepare as well. And at the same time, I can make the questions for the show based on that. And that leads us to this point, researching your guests. Because it's very important to go prepare, not like me in some episodes. For example, the last episode that I recorded, I was not prepared, but I knew a few things about that person and that allowed me to go to the conversation. But for all the other episodes, I came prepared, and prepare meaning just trying to find as much of information as possible about them. That's one way to do it. Like go through their social media platforms, websites that they have. If they wrote books, try to, find a summary of that book or something. And it's important if you find personal information about them, because people love talking about themselves. And some might be reluctant to share personal stories, some will love it. So try to find as much information as possible. And here we go as well to the leveraging AI tools. How I do prepare myself now for an episode. I grab as much information as possible in the doc and I share that with ChatGPT and tell them, I want, you're a podcast expert, create as many engaging questions as you can based on my guest details. And it's amazing. Like the questions that are ChatGPT is creating are out of this world. And this is also very important, to have a backup set of questions. I don't know, maybe your guest is not having a good day or he's just answering in short sentences. So you have to keep on guiding the conversation and ask a lot of questions. And I have 2 sets of questions already prepared. One for the topic of digital nomadism and one for the business side of things. Like, I don't know, what was a changing point in your career? Why did you choose that? And you can always continue asking open-ended questions based on what they answered. How did you feel in that moment that thing happened to you or whatever? But you need to continue to guide the conversation with as many questions as possible if your guest is not talking continuously, because I have episodes in which I talk from 1 hour, 5 minutes maximum, because they're talking a lot, and which is great because that's why you invite them in the show, and that helps you. But having backup set of questions prepared just in case is helpful. And of course, you have to go prepare for the interview. That means like be rest, not be tired, and so on. Try to have like glass of water with you. Try to be in a quiet environment, and so on. And of course, as I already said, have information about your guest. And speaking of environment, it's very important to have a comfortable environment for both you and the guest. And I usually suggest to them, especially if they don't have experience with podcasts, to be in a room that is quiet. They are not distracted by family, coworkers, and so on, like outside noise and such things. And when I begin the interviewing, I want to make them feel comfortable, and myself as well. So I don't jump straight into recording. I first have a chit chat for about 2 or 3 minutes, in which I simply talk with them, how you've been, what you're doing, like, I don't know, what's the weather, whatever, like random questions. You don't have to be like very specific, but to make themselves feel comfortable and realize that it's actually just a conversation, like between 2 friends. It's not something, I don't know, a job interview or something stressful. because I was in the situation in which either me or my guest were stressed out, and I wasn't able to focus. That person wasn't able to focus, and I was like, "Holy shit! What's going on here? What are we gonna do about it?" And guiding the conversation and allowing spontaneity, it's very important. For example, I had episodes in which I prepare a long set of questions, and probably I use one or two between those, because the conversation was moving towards a direction that I was like enjoying. Like I was like, forget all those questions. The story that this person is sharing with me, it's amazing. I want to share that. So I guide the conversation based on what they say with my like questions. Like I come out of the blue, and this is really important if you are a guest, if you are a host. Sorry, to listen. Don't talk yourself too much. For example, even that I'm introvert, probably because I'm an introvert, I love to talk a lot. And at the beginning, it was hard for me to stop talking and let my guests speaking, because that's why I invited them there. So just by trying to maybe summarize a bit what they just said, if they talk for like 10 minutes, summarize a bit what they just said. Once you show them that you're actively listening to them, and secondly, you allow listeners to actually get some information from there. And after that, you straight away go with the next question or guide the conversation based on what they said forward. And guiding, as I mentioned previously, is really important to be made spontaneously. Don't just go through your question that you prepared. Again, it's good to have them there, but if the conversation unfolds nicely, just go through it. And another important fact is to track the metrics and the feedback that you get and pivot if necessary. For example, let's say you're recording for 1 year your podcast and you don't have listeners. What do? You continue, you try to make changes or to see, ask for feedback. Your listeners can be a gold mine for feedback. Ask them what you like, what you don't like, what you expect to cover, or what's I don't know, your reason why of not listening to them, and so on. And I didn't use that, but for example, Spotify has the option to add, like you add on a blog, for the listeners to add comments, for you to ask questions for them, to create polls, and so on. And that's a good way to create engagement and make them part of the conversation. Now, going to probably the most exciting part, finding and inviting guests in the show. And this is huge because without important guests, it's very hard to have an interview style podcast. And it doesn't have to be celebrities, but people that have interesting stories, people that have something to share. And as Alex said at the beginning, the easiest and the most good way to do it is to use your network. Use your friends, use your colleagues, ex-colleagues, and so on. Because those will almost certainly accept to be in your show, to support you, and so on. And that way you'll be able to basically get traction, learn, and have your first guest in the show. Other ways is to use social media platforms. And LinkedIn for me was gold. I think 90% of my guests are from LinkedIn. Is the way I invited Chris Do in the show. Chris, if you're watching, I salute you. And those are basically, LinkedIn basically being a connection-based platform. You connect with others, you build a rapport, and after that, you invite them in the show. And again, people love to share their stories, love to be promoted. And the podcast is doing that for them. So they will accept. Even high individuals and celebrities like Chris, he accepted to be in the show because probably he has a vision that, I don't know, we share certain traits, or we have a certain vision, and so on, and probably the show will be successful at some point. It's still slowly growing, but not as successful as other podcasts out there. So another one is to literally ask for referrals. And people know others. So ask them, do you know anyone that might be a good fit in my podcast? listen to your audience recommendation, because people are like, man, I want to see that person in the show. Can you invite him? And so on. Another way is to use Tinder for Podcaster, which is matchmaker.fm. Yeah, it's such thing. I heard about it when I created this presentation. Personally, I get all my guests through LinkedIn, personal network, referrals, and that is it. But all these websites are basically ways to get guests in your show. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. And of course, you can connect and collaborate with other podcasters. And that way is basically sharing also audiences. And before going to the questions, a trick. Try to say in your episode the name of other podcasts. Because that way Spotify and other platforms will push as a recommendation during that particular your show as well. And for example, mentioning a huge podcast like The Future of Chris Do, or The Game of Alex Hormozi, will probably show your episode as well there. Questions, please.
Is it better if we tell the guest topics beforehand or expected to respond to the questions spontaneously? For example, because I already did like 2 to 3 podcasts and I've never tell my guests the topics that we will cover. Is it okay, or should we tell them the topics that we will cover during our podcast?
I think if you tell them beforehand, they'll make them feel much more comfortable, and they'll allow them to be prepared as well. Because if they literally go in a show without knowing what they're going to cover, it's quite hard. Of course, there are situations in which out of the blue they know. For example, when I did the episode with Jonuts, I didn't tell him like what we're going to discuss about, because he's an expert in marketing. I know that the main topic will be marketing. The main topic will be how he arrived at that point to get a job and so on. So we didn't have to discuss these things, and we are friends, so we know each other. But I don't know. Maybe after today you won't. So it depends. But if it's recommended to tell them topics, at least some guests actually asked me the questions. I was like, I'm not sharing the questions personally. Some others sharing the questions beforehand. For example, I was guest in one single episode, so I was on the other side of the mic, and my host shared the questions with me. And of course, it was easier for me to prepare, but in the same time, you will like as an interviewer to make the conversation spontaneously. So the best way to do that is to not share beforehand questions, but share topics. So that way they'll be able to do that.
Okay, so you said that the monetization is the long run goal, right? Can you unravel a bit? Here you go. Let's
Don't read my mind anymore, but it will be after this. This is just how to promote your podcast, but we'll talk about monetization as well.
Because I'm curious, specifically in your case, what is the end game here? Or is there one?
Good question, yeah.
In terms of actually, okay, so I understand that you're doing it because you're truly kind of moved by something more deeper than money, let's say, but having a buff on the side is a very good bonus, right? So
Of course.
doing, especially if you get it from something you're truly passionate about and you're good at. So I'm curious to see, like, do you actually have a strategy, like a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, like how long? When you said it's a long-term thing, what do you actually, is it like a quarter, a year, 5 years, 10 years?
What if I told you that I already made money from the podcast without actually trying to monetize?
Here you go. Oh, that's amazing. I would say.
Yeah, and I will tell you in a second how.
I think Stuart had a question. I saw his hand working.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to be about marketing, and you popped onto the slide. I was like, there we go.
You guys are reading my mind. So yeah, this is important how to promote your podcast, because without putting it out there and make others listen to it, it's pointless. No one will listen. And one of the best way to do it is cross promote with other podcasters. So basically partner with others and try to cross promote. The option actually I didn't use. This is the one that I use the most. And as I showed you at the beginning, I do most on LinkedIn. So I push every single time I launch a new episode. I create the teaser of the episode. I put it in a video format, and I share it with audience. And that way, I make them interested in the topics, and sometimes I share as well the timestamps, and they are listening through LinkedIn. Another way to do it through social platform is, of course, to repurpose the content. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and so on. And of course, YouTube. YouTube will be huge, I think, for me, because I'm not yet there. But since I already have the video recordings, once I will push it to YouTube, I think the podcast will grow even faster. By the way, so far, I overpassed 1,100 downloads. And that's for, as I mentioned, with the episode today that is not launched yet, 16 episodes only, and just launched in January. You can be guest in other podcasts. It's another way to promote your own podcast. And of course, I mentioned my podcast when I was a guest in a podcast. I'm about to be guest in another podcast next week, no, 2 weeks from now. And that way you're able basically to share the name of the podcast. And as I mentioned before, platform will automatically suggest the podcast. Plus, those listening to that show will check me out as well. Another way is to collaborate with influencers. And here, influencers I know has a bad name, let's say, but there are real influencers, people that are actually having a huge impact in the world. For example, Chris Do is one of them. People are following him because he's like sharing for free, I think 90% of his content. And that's why he has 2 million followers on YouTube. And guess what? He posted 2 snippets of video from our recording on his YouTube channel with 2 million followers. And of course, I got a lot of traffic from that, both towards my website and to my show. People that never heard before that of me. And that's one way to do it. And wasn't, because collaborating with influencers can be 2 ways. Basically, I did actually the cross promote with other podcaster way, but this collaborative influencer can be also paid one. So to pay someone to share content, which I don't do, and I don't think I will. To attend industry events and conferences, it's another good way. And this is a good way to promote basically anything. Network with podcast communities. This is something that I know Kent is doing on Reddit, and I plan to do as well, which is a good way to basically share your podcast in other platforms and basically be engaged in the community. Create an engaging website and blog. It's currently in the making, not live yet, but this is another way to share the content in various forms, because you can repurpose your episode as a blog. You can share more detailed show notes, transcripts. Of course, hosting providers like the Red Circle that I use allows that. I'm basically having a website there, but I don't have full control. The other option is to develop strategic partnerships. And here it's really depending on your goals and what network do you have. You can partner with, I don't know, a bigger podcast creator than yourself or a podcast network. For example, one of my clients for my web design business has a networking podcast. Is not having my audience, so I won't partner with her, but it's just an example. She has, I think, around 20 podcasts in her network. So all those 20 podcasts are promoting between each other. Leveraging email marketing is another powerful way. I started a newsletter together with the podcast. Of course, it's an independent way to share content, but in the same time, I'm sharing the episodes in almost every single newsletter. And of course, offering exclusive content and giveaways. This I'm not doing yet, but it's another way to give back to the community and try to have different approach when it comes to promoting yourself. About promotion, guys, who has a question?
Yeah, just wondering about YouTube. How come you haven't moved into YouTube just yet? For like micro content, repurposing your content?
Time. Time. That was my main challenge. I didn't have the time to.
Because you're repurposing content at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah,
I like micro kind of shorts and little posts.
Just a bit, not at the level that I want. So like basically I have 1 or 2 per episode, but not for every single episode. I usually post just to LinkedIn or Instagram.
Okay,
so I didn't have
just those 2 platforms at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's basically another like suggestion to start with 1 platform, focus on that, grow that, and move to the next. But of course, when it comes to YouTube, it was a mistake to not start directly there. But meanwhile, it seemed that YouTube launched a hosting platform, so I'll be able to move there. So probably I had luck to not stop yet there.
Fair.
Please, Ken.
One other thing to add to the promotion, so there's like 30 or 40 or 100 different podcast listening apps, right? Not everyone uses Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There's Overcast and Stitcher and Radio Public and Podcast Addicts, and there's some Danish one, I can't think of the name of it at the moment. And a lot of them have different niches, right? So people doing a very specific type of business podcast are gonna gravitate to this listening app, and so on and so forth. And so I found like when you use your hosting platform, it gives you an RSS feed and you can publish it across all of these different listening apps. And you want to do as many as you can. Don't just stick to the main ones, right? Because you need to have them, but you'll be amazed at how many listens you get from very obscure listening apps. Like I'll check my stats and I'll be like, I never even heard of this. Or if you're doing a big fiction podcast, there's a specific app called Apollo, which is only for fiction podcasts.
Yeah, I
If you're
heard
not
this.
there, right, then you're missing out on whatever 100,000 people. And then there's finally, there's now a Goodreads for podcasts called Good Pods. So it's the same functionality, the same kind of social listening platform, and you can create a profile there as a podcaster, and you can see who's listening to what and build a network and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that addition. And yeah, I think so far I am present or I manually put myself on 7 or something platforms, but I know they grab automatic as well, some of them. But yeah, this is a gold addition. Thank you so much. Please.
It was just an addition, there's but I guess for this one, you really have to go really big and have a couple of very, let's say, well-received podcasts. Some of them they actually have, we're having this, like for instance, Tender for TV, which is a huge podcast, I guess, alliance or studio in the US. And they do investigative journaling podcasts. And they have, I think under the brand at this point, more than 10 podcasts with like millions of downloads on all these platforms. So the very smart thing that they're doing is that they're releasing new podcasts and it's free every week. But if you want to binge them Netflix style, you have to go to their platform and buy their subscription fee to watch all of them at once. So that's another kind of way of making money out of it. But as I said, you have to have an actual established portfolio of podcasts that people would actually pay money to listen.
Yeah, true. And basically being a network.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, regarding the social media, I'm not doing a podcast, but because I'm working in the space, if you guys are searching, for example, for Gary Vee, Gary Vee has an amazing slide share how he's repurposing content. And he's actually talking about how he's cutting everything, how he's using the podcast, the conference that he's using, what type of format is going on each individual platform, how he's creating the caption. I think that I shared it with you, Gary, and you can share it with everyone. It's class from a perspective of understanding exactly how to repurpose content, because repurposing content is all about attracting new audience, and each individual social media has a different audience, is consuming content in a different way, in a different format.
Yeah, very good addition. And indeed, he's doing an amazing job, something that also Chris Go is doing for the future. The only thing is that both these guys has a huge team behind them.
Yeah, but you start from somewhere, right?
Yeah, correct.
And social media is all, my personal philosophy is social media is all about consistency. They love consistency because this is the way that they make money. So the more that consistent in the way that you publish your content is, you're going to grow your stats, and algorithms going to understand more rapidly this way is actually on top of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And the most interesting part, I guess, monetizing your podcast. So this is the only way I monetize right now. Indirect revenue streams, and what that is. Basically, since I started this podcast, people start finding about me. For them, I look like a small authority in the field, and from time to time only I promote my business on LinkedIn, and people are connecting with me and wanting to be in the podcast and so on. And directly, they found about my web design services, and that's how I get clients. And something that I never envisioned, and I didn't imagine that can be connected, but it was a way to drive clients and make money indirectly. And the other most popular one to monetize a podcast is sponsorships. We all know the annoying ads in some podcasts that are taking like 1 minute. That's one way to monetize, and it's very good way to monetize if you have a huge listening number of listeners. The other one is affiliate marketing. Basically, as I mentioned, all the hosting companies or your own website that you have for your podcast has a show note. And usually guests are sharing tools they use, books, resources, and so on. And all those can be affiliate links. You can join affiliate programs and so on and plug your affiliate links inside the content. But of course, make sure to have a disclaimer that you do that. Donations, Patreon, not Patreon, buy coffee or breakfast in my case. I put a link to if you guys want to buy breakfast. Joke aside, you have these donation links that you can put, and I don't know, engaging listeners or like people that are getting some value for your show can make donations. Premium content. For example, you can record premium episodes with, I don't know, Gary Vee in your show or someone and have like an amazing masterclass with them, and you put that as a premium content and you charge for it. Merchandise. At some point, probably that small logo from the left corner that Raluca created for the show might be on a cap or something, might be on a t-shirt. And people, I don't know, the Nomad Entrepreneur show will become so popular that people will, I don't know, wear like they wear Nike right now. Live events. For example, I'm getting paid to talk here. Joke aside, I'm not. But you can be invited to live events thanks to your, I don't know, podcasting experience and so on, and get paid for it. Build online courses and workshops. For example, this workshop that I host now, I know it's not perfect. It's one of the first podcasts that I do, workshop that I do live, but I can be very easily transform it into a paid workshop or an online course that, I don't know, can be monetized after that. Consulting and coaching, something that I actually do. And people are like booking calls to consult them, how to launch a podcast, or in my case, how to stop trading time for money as a freelancer and become a solopreneur, and so on, or how to become a digital nomad. Subscription-based model, in which basically it's what Alex just told us previously. There are platforms and podcasts that are doing this approach of basically being paid to listen to that show. And that was all in a nutshell. And I know that monetization was a huge topic, so I will want to listen to you guys' questions.
It's not a question, it's actually a case practice of merchandise done well. So I literally ordered 2 t-shirts from freaking USA while living in Malaysia, and I paid $30 in tax and fees and customs just to get the merchandise from one of my favorite podcasts, which is a couple that is based in the US. And the thing is that why I did that is because their merchandise is actually amazing. So if you do merchandise, their biggest selling point was truly beautiful designs, like actual art on a t-shirt or like
Nice.
cat and mug and stuff like that. So if you do the merchandise, don't just take like a cheap t-shirt and slap something on it, because that actually might be detrimental to your brand.
Exactly.
But all the hype with these guys, they have amazing shows, but their merchandise is top notch, literally.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And
And
they're doing a lot of money on that actually. So
yeah, there are a lot of, for example, if I still talking about Chris Do, has this cap with God is a designer or something, which is like an amazing cap. And yeah, there are a lot of ways to monetize merch. I know you guys that are watching online, I neglect you. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments, and I will answer every single one of them after the live recording. For those presents, please hit me with questions. We still have 10 minutes.
So Genesis question from how to promote a podcast. So basically, well, speaking about the guests, well, Indonesia itself is a hot market for video podcasts, especially YouTube. But since most of the few products are filled with, controversial figures and stuff as the guests, do you think it will hurt the credibility, or it will be beneficial for inviting those kinds of guests to promote the content itself?
Yeah, the thing is that it's a way to monetize it. Like automatically, if you join the monetization program, I don't know, it's AdSense or how it's called for YouTube, you'll be able to monetize it that way. And indeed, you never know what type of ads they are pushing to your content, and of course can affect your brand. I didn't get the guest part when they are. You mean that to ask them to?
No, because in Indonesia, I mean, like you might heard about Deddy Corbuzier and Deddy Sumargo. They are like the top of mind two best, like most people podcasters in Indonesia. But most of their guests are filled with controversial figures, such as they have this kind of case, they have this kind of case. But because they always invite those kind of controversial guests, it boosts their brands. Does it will hurt and affect the credibility of our podcast, or it might be the best way to boost our brand?
I think that all depends on.
Yeah. Joe Rogan's.
Exactly. That comes to mind. Yeah, I think it all depends on the goal of the podcast. But yeah, Joe Rogan is a perfect example. So if you want to get famous, controversial figures can be a good way to have them in the show. But yeah, it all depends on your goals. For example, if your goals is to be paid from sponsorships or to be, have exclusivity as Joe Rogan has with his show on Spotify, then yes. But if your goal is to actually, monetize it in different other ways, people might not. If you plan to build an online course, for example, or something, consulting, people might not trust you.
So, sorry, I'm the annoying one that persists on the business part. Did you set yourself actual targets of like income targets?
No.
Why?
Because I want to see if this actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't know, I enjoy doing long term. So far I do, but in the same time it's time consuming, as I mentioned. So I want to see after 2-3 months more. I already did 4 until now, and see how things unfold. But I'm not thinking about monetizing, for example, this year, or like direct monetization, like sponsorships and so on. But I enjoy all the external indirect way to monetization, and especially the collaboration part of things. And the collaboration, speak of collaborations part of things, this is how we can stay connected. It's easy to, say that I have, a target of certain amount of money in the first year or something, because monetization of podcasting is again very long term, and it's very hard to track the actual money that you get from it. For example, the easiest way probably with affiliate links, that's possible. But for example, sponsorships and so on. But apart from that, it's very hard. And speaking of sponsorships, and I mentioned at some point hosting platforms. Another way to you need to consider when you choose a hosting platform is one that allows you to insert on the fly either ads or certain parts of the episodes that you might not have to do, to re-edit your episode. For example, that's why I choose Red Circle at the beginning, because they allow to me inserting in all the episodes if at some point I want to put ads, for example, or if I want to put certain parts. But going back to that, No, I don't have specific target in terms of money, in terms of audience, and so on. I just want to see if this works, if this is something that people will like to listen a lot. I am planning to insert that feedback and polls and questionnaire on Spotify to get feedback, to get more. Of course, I have some feedback directly in messages and so on, which is great. But I want more, like for listeners that don't follow me on LinkedIn, for listeners that have no experience, they have no experience, personal connection with me so far. So yeah, that's part of the plan. But yeah, specific goals and so on.
I have more questions.
Okay. Anyone else? I'll just smile to the camera now.
In a nice new picture, sure.
And I need my phone to have a selfie with all of you guys, if you don't mind.
There will be a lot.
Like this from here.
Like I will be the fifth subscriber of your channel.
It doesn't wide angle.
Sorry?
I'll be the fifth subscriber on your channel.
Thank you so much. On my YouTube channel?
I'm your YouTube channel.
Okay, I have a YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah.
Joking, yeah. Here's the YouTube channel that I think has 2 videos, and the Roma Entrepreneur Show that has 0 videos, and the website that is not launched yet, but they'll be soon.
Yeah.
Raul, can you pass me my phone? That was it, everyone. Thanks everyone for joining in online. I won't forget you, and I'll answer all your questions that I hope you put in the comments. Thank you so much. I'll share the slides as well. And now I'll take a selfie. Hey everyone! Oh my god, the light is so powerful. No light anymore. Is everyone fitting in? Should we go more behind?
You had in the.
Oh, I forgot to include me as well. I think,
Should we?
am I not visible? Only Emma is not.
People need to move on this.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, hold
now we're talking. I think it's pretty good. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was great because it was so easy between so many familiar faces. So thank you so much. And for external faces that came and joined, thank you so much. And great questions. And if you have any questions, you still have time. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As always, pura vida, and talk to you soon. Just 1 second to give Marushka.